In this lecture, we're going to introduce a process we call the cycle of teaching. The essence of the process lies in an interpretation of the word educate. Educate comes from the Latin word educare. It can be translated in different ways and thus have different meanings in different contexts and provide space for interpretation. For example, it can mean to bring up, which often is used for the upbringing of a child in which education includes moral and social training. It can also be used in the context of ducer, meaning to lead, which provides the interpretation, the act of leading someone out of ignorance. Or, one that I frequently stumble upon in my readings, come from the loose translation, to draw out that which lies within. This seems to be emphasized in education research as a process of facilitating the learner's own ability to bring out their innate knowledge or skill, rather than merely the process of transferring knowledge from the teacher to the student. We can play with any of these interpretations and apply them to the dance. However, there's one insight we had that we believe is very fitting for the dance teaching, and that is to think about educare as in to draw out our students' mental representation. Meaning, in the process of teaching, as often as possible, we want to create opportunities for us to get a glimpse of what mental representation our students are forming from our teaching. Because, as we mentioned in Lecture 2, it's not possible to directly express a mental representation. The best way to draw this out of our student is to observe how they use what we teach them. From this observation, we decide what we see and hear aligns with our intuitive feeling about the dance, in other words, our own mental representation. As a teacher, we can use different ways to extract what's within. You can explain something and ask them to demonstrate what they have understood. You can observe the dancing in the context that is independent from you, and in fact, this might be perhaps the best way to draw out their mental representation because there's less risk that they're simply mimicking your behavior. You can also ask them to describe something rather than demonstrating it, or you can give them multiple choice questions that reveal something about their understanding. Of course, if it's a partner dance, they can dance together, and if it's a social dance, they can dance with anyone else who's learning the same dance. Using different approaches gives you more insight on their current mental representation, and this can give you valuable understanding for where they are in their learning and where to take it next. So the cycle can be described in the following way. We have our mental representation of the dance. We formulate our mental model. We create models and select examples to express our model. We find different ways of telling stories and teaching these models and examples. And while engaging with them, our students form their mental representations. We get a glimpse of their mental representation by letting them dance and verbalize what they're doing. And this process, meanwhile, also helps our students form their mental models, which helps them better communicate with others about the dance, which helps them give themselves and each other feedback, and which also helps them design and set their own goals. And lastly, we use our observation as input to see where to go next with our teaching. If the input you're getting tells you that you're on the right track, great. Just move forward with your plans. However, if not, you need to ask yourself, where do you need to improve? The improvement could happen at any stage of the cycle of teaching. So let's go over each moment with this question in mind. Do we need to refine our own mental representation? Perhaps we haven't yet formed a clear enough intuition and skill in this topic. We might not even recognize that we are not able to demonstrate the movement consistently. Actively training the dance for ourselves, researching, seeking advice, and mentorship are the main tools to help us with this issue. Now, of course, this obviously takes time, and if we find ourselves in class unable to consistently deliver the material for the students at the quality we want, we might simply need to express that fact to the students and rather collaborate with them to reach a certain goal. Now, if it's not our mental representation, then we have to ask ourselves, is it our mental model? Perhaps we haven't yet formed a clear enough picture in our mind, so we are unable to provide sufficient clarity in our demonstrations and explanations of the model. Or perhaps we created an inefficient mental model that doesn't give us the clarity and consistency we need. In a way, every new mental model is a new perspective on reality. Therefore, when needed, changing our mental model will help us get a new perspective on reality. Next, the challenge can come from the stories, models, and examples we're using. If we call back to Lecture 4, we use stories, models, and examples to emphasize a particular component of our mental model. So, we need to ask ourselves, are these actually helping us communicate the mental model we have? One of the big traps many teachers fall into comes from using the same approach to teaching as was taught to them when they were first learning the dance themselves. It happens often that we don't examine whether the way we learned was effective or not, or even if that's still what we are dancing or not. Rather, we just connect to the fact that whatever journey we went through got us to where we are, and if it's good enough for us, it should be good enough for our students. Now, we believe this way of thinking is a disservice to our students. It should be easier for each new generation to reach the level of the previous one because we're standing on their shoulders. This does not mean that we don't use anything we learned from our teachers and mentors, rather that we are selective about it. It can be very useful to watch our own dance videos with a critical eye to see if what we teach is to be seen in what we do, and if possible, maybe ask somebody else to see and observe that for us. If you manage to break away from old models and look at your dancing from a fresh perspective, the chances are good that you can develop stories and models and select examples that overlaps well with your dancing, and from there, teach something that truly reflects what you do. Or maybe, the improvement to help our students form a better mental representation lies in the way we deliver the content in class. It might be that our mental model is correct, but we struggle to communicate the right words and exercises. The clear communication of abstract ideas take a lot of skill. The words you choose to describe the dance matters a lot. This is a powerful concept that we have a whole lesson for called Language That Moves, where we go into a lot of details about the words we choose when talking about different aspects of the dance. One of the challenges with exercises that we mentioned in Lecture 5 is that students might inevitably form bad habits that could come from too much isolated training. When we look at our students' dance outside of the context of training, do we see the exercises that were meant as a vehicle to learn a skill? Or do we see them intuitively interact with the dance? Maybe the different mental representations we observe in our students come not from our model or our descriptions, but from the translations the students do for themselves. Depending on each person's background, we might observe different translations, different interpretations of our explanations. This is especially true if we are teaching to a group with a wide variety of learning backgrounds, for instance at a workshop or a festival. Here, it is important to use all the tools you have to inspire the students to see the novelty in what you are doing and to help them see the nuances that distinguish between what they are doing and what you want them to do. Finally, of course, it's very possible that your students just need more time. Depending on the complexity of the model, both in terms of understanding and in terms of skill, it may simply not be reasonable for us to see results right away. Learning takes time, and if what we observe is not an accurate reflection of our model, but does seem to be approaching it, the best choice might simply be to ensure that the content is revisited. You can communicate to your students what it is that you see so far and what you feel is missing. And depending on what type of class setting you have, you might choose to assign them some homework so that they can continue practicing without you. And ideally, you return to the material soon so that the students can progress and you have a new chance to observe them and refine your approaches if necessary. Having said all of this, in some cases, the most powerful option is to be okay with our students forming a mental representation that only partially overlaps with ours. In some contexts, this is exactly what we want when thinking about having your students form their own styles as dancers. It's important that we are somewhat deliberate with how much overlap we want to see between the mental model we are communicating and what we see our students do. No overlap means that there's no common ground to work on, and building on top of ideas and techniques to go deeper will be close to impossible. So, determine how much unique self-expression you would like your students to have within the context of your class. In other words, how much difference do you want to see in their dancing compared to yours, and where? So this concludes the lecture on the cycle of teaching. We hope it inspires you to create more moments in class when you can observe your students dancing, and also moments that allows them to communicate their understanding with you so that you can give yourself the information you need to lead them in a productive direction. When you're ready, join us for the last lecture of this series, where we'll share one last important message that we believe will serve you on your journey. All right, I'll see you there.